Have you ever faced a moment where one decision could define your career or even your life? Maya Carter, a seasoned investigative reporter, stood at the edge of the press room doors. The air was thick with tension. Cameras flashed like lightning and murmurs of the crowds whirled around her. She had spent months digging into a story that could shake the nation, and tonight she finally had the chance to confront one of the most powerful men in the world, President Donald Trump. Her palms were sweaty. Her heart raced. Every instinct screamed that something was off about this briefing. Questions she had prepared seemed trivial now, and the weight of her responsibility pressed down like a physical force. The press room wasn't for a moment. President Trump's gaze swept across the room, lingering on Maya. Something about the way he looked at her made her pause. There was a spark in his eyes, a mix of curiosity and calm authority that unsettled her. Maya clenched her notebook. Is it worth asking the questions that might get me blacklisted? She wondered silently. She had seen reporters storm out off briefings before, sometimes in protest, sometimes in frustration. She could walk out now, leave the spectacle behind, and protect her career from potential backlash. But something deep inside her, a voice she rarely ignored, whispered, "Wait. Don't leave just yet." And just as she took a tentative step toward the exit, a voice boomed across the room, cutting through the silence. "Maya, wait a second." The sudden command froze hair in place. Every eye turned to her. And at that moment, Maya knew this wasn't just another press briefing. Something extraordinary was about to happen. Mia Sharp skipped. The room seemed to shrink as all attention pivoted toward her. President Trump's voice was firm, yet something in it hinted at sincerity. Chef rose mid-step, the exit suddenly miles away. Reporters whispered among themselves. Some frowned, others smirked. Most were shocked. No one had ever seen the president call someone back so directly. Why me? Maya thought, feeling a mixture of pride and unease. She wasn't here for applause, she was here for truth. Yet the world around her seemed to blur, as if the room itself held its breath. Trump walked toward her, his stride purposeful. The crowd murmured again. Maya instinctively straightened. Gripping her notebook like a lifeline, he stopped a few feet away, his eyes locking onto hers. "I noticed you were about to leave," he said. There was no accusation, no mockery, just observation. Maya blinked. "Yes, she started, then faltered. Words seemed inadequate fourth moment. He leaned slightly, lowering his voice so only she could hear. Sometimes the toughest questions aren't ones people expect, but walking away won't get you the answer you need. Her stomach twisted. She had spent weeks preparing, revising, second-guessing every angle. And now, hearing these words from him directly, she felt an unexpected shift in her perspective. Could this man so often vilified and misunderstood really understand the weight of responsibility she carried? Something inside her stirred a sense of possibility of change. She nodded slowly, stepping back into the press room rather than out. Little did she know, the next few minutes would redefine her entire understanding of courage, integrity, and the power of asking the right question at the right time. Maya returned to her spot, but her mind raced. Every reporter around her sensed the tension, the unspoken drama. Cameras clicked incessantly, but her eyes stayed on Trump. It wasn't just Apress's briefing. It was a test, though she didn't yet understand. The rules. Why call me back? She asked herself silently. Perhaps it was ego. Perhaps a political tactic. Or perhaps, just perhaps, he recognized something genuine in her questions. The president began speaking, but this time not to the room at large. He spoke directly to her. "Igno, you're looking for more than headlines. You want the truth even if it's uncomfortable." Maya's pen hovered above her notebook, her pulse quickened. She had reported stories that exposed corruption, deception, and injustice, but nothing like this. She realized that the entire press room filled with seasoned journalists had underestimated the human behind the title. Trump wasn't just a figure on television or in the papers. He was someone who could see intent, who could respond to curiosity rather than confrontation, and then commit the real pressure. Her editor's words from the night before echoed in her head. Brave, don't let fear dictate your questions, but be smart. Don't get played. Now, facing the president in person, Maya understood the stakes. This wasn't about winning or losing. It was about integrity, courage, and knowing when to push and when to listen. Every heartbeat felt amplified. Every glance carried meaning. The room, once intimidating, now seemed to vibrate with possibility. She took a deep breath, prepared to ask the question that would define this briefing and maybe even her career. "Mr. President," Maya began, her voice steady but her hands trembling slightly. "In a world where truth is often subjective, how do you personally decide what deserves action and what doesn't?" The room fell silent. Reporters froze mid-pen stroke, their own questions forgotten. Trump looked directly at her, the intensity in his eyes almost tangible. "I ask myself one thing," he replied. "What impact will this have on real people? Not headlines, not polls, not ratings, people, lives, families, communities. That's what I measure." Maya felt an unfamiliar pang of empathy, a human connection she hadn't expected. She had faced countless politicians, but rarely someone who answered. Not with rhetoric, but with an underlying principle that resonated. "Most people think politics is about power," he continued. "It's not. It's about responsibility, and responsibility's heavier than people imagine." Her fingers tightened on the notebook. Could it be true? Could someone so polarizing on the surface actually hold this kind of perspective? Maya's mind raced. She could frame this as a soundbite, a viral clip, or she could dig deeper. She chose the latter. And how do you handle the criticism? Sheprist. The media scrutiny, the personal attacks. Trump paused, then smiled slightly. "You learn to listen, not just to applause, but to those who disagree. That's where growth comes from. And sometimes you learn the most from people who challenge you their hardest." The lesson hit Maya hard. In a world obsessed with division, here was Simeon advocating reflection, resilience, and listening. Suddenly, Deborah's room didn't feel hostile anymore. It felt alive with the possibility of understanding. For a moment, the room was quiet, almost as if the world had paused. Reporters glanced at one another, unsure whether to move or speak. Maya felt a strange calm in her chest, an odd sense that this wasn't just another briefing. It was a turning point. Trump's eyes didn't waver. "I see you've been hesitant," he said. "Speaking out is sometimes easier than standing up. But courage comes when you stay, even when you're unsure." Maya swallowed hard. His words weren't just about politics. They were about life. The same courage she needed to expose stories of injustice was the same courage he was pointing out now. To face fear, to stand for truth, and to confront discomfort head-on. She glanced around. Her colleagues were scribbling notes, but she noticed one thing. None of them had dared to ask the personal, challenging questions she had. Most were playing it safe, but she hadn't. Trump's voice softened almost imperceptibly. "The world will try to make you compromise. But don't. Integrity is louder than headlines, stronger than fear, and sometimes the smallest question asked at the right moment changes everything." Maya felt a lump in her throat. This was no longer about reporting. It was about understanding responsibility, power, and the human heart beneath it all. She realized then that walking out would have meant missing this lesson entirely, a lesson she would carry far beyond the press room. Gathering her courage, Maya leaned forward. "Mr. President," she asked, "has there ever been a time you wished you could do something differently but couldn't because of expectations or fear of backlash?" The room seemed to hold its breath. Cameras clicked. Pens paused. Every reporter sensed the weight of this question. It wasn't about politics. It was about humanity. Trump's expression softened. He paused, and for a moment he looked like any man reflecting on a life filled with triumphs and regrets. "Yes," he admitted quietly. "Many times decisions are never simple, and sometimes as doing what's right comes out of personalist." Maya felt a wave of understanding. She realized this was the moment reporters often overlooked. Leaders are human, too, and human decisions aren't perfect. They're courageous, flawed, and often misunderstood. Her hands trembled slightly as she scribbled notes, but chuckled in help, but feel inspired. Maybe the world was more nuanced than headlines made it seem. "And that's why I'm here," she whispered under her breath. Not for applause, not for ratings, but to hear the truth others feared to ask. Trump leaned back slightly, observing her closely. "Most people don't listen anymore," he said. "Even when someone is asking honest questions, they listen to confirm their beliefs, not to understand." Maya's heart pounded. He wasn't lecturing her. He was revealing something vital. That courage wasn't just asking questions. It was also listening. Truly listening without judgment or bias. She realized this applied to her life outside the press room, too. In her career, in her friendships, even in her family. How often had she listened just to respond rather than understand? The moment felt heavy but illuminating. For a reporter who spent years chasing stories, Maya suddenly saw her work in a different light. It wasn't just about exposing wrongdoing. It was about seeking understanding, revealing humanity, and sometimes extending grace where it was least expected. Trump noticed her expression, nodding slightly as if recognizing her realization. "It's not always about what you ask. It's about what you're willing to hear," he said softly. Maya nodded, feeling a mix of humility and resolve. She had thought this encounter would be adversarial, but instead it had become transformative. Just as Maya felt a sense of clarity, a new wave of doubt crashed over her. What if she misunderstood him? What if festery she wrote after this was criticized or worse, dismissed entirely? Her fingers clenched the notebook tighter. The instincts of a seasoned journalist told her caution. But something else, something deeper, urged her to continue. Trump, sensing the hesitation, leaned slightly closer. "Doubt is natural," he said. "It's what makes people question, reflect, and improve. But don't let doubt stop you from asking the question you know needs to be asked." Maya's pulse quickened. She felt a strange connection, as if he understood the invisible pressures she faced every day. The fear of being wrong, the fear of being judged, the fear of making a mistake. All of it felt visible to him somehow. And then Hesmold, a subtle but reassuring gesture. "Courage isn't the absence of fear. Courage is moving forward, despite it." Something inside her shifted. Doubt didn't disappear, but it became fuel rather than an obstacle. She realized the press room, the cameras, and eventhy critics outside weren't the adversaries. Her own hesitation was. With renewed determination, she lifted her pen. The story wasn't just about him anymore. It was about her and the courage to face uncertainty head-on. Maya's pen hovered above her notebook. Every journalist in the room was watching, waiting for the next question, but she felt a singular focus. This moment was hers, and she needed to ask what truly mattered. "Mr. President," she said, her voice calm, "if the decisions you make impact people in ways you never imagined, how do you know you're still doing the right thing?" Trump's gaze softened. And for the first time, Maya noticed the subtle vulnerability beneath his confident exterior. "You don't always know," he admitted. "Sometimes you only realize years later, when you see the consequences, the lives affected, the growth or suffering your actions created." Her heart sank. The weight of responsibility of being in a position to influence millions suddenly felt tangible. She understood then that leadership was not power. It was accountability, humility, and sacrifice, and yet he continued. "You keep moving forward because doing nothing is worse than doing something imperfectly but sincerely." Maya scribbled notes furiously, aware that this could become the defining quote of her career. But more than that, she felt an emotional resonance she hadn't expected. A reminder that courage and integrity were measured in action, not words. She realized she wasn't just witnessing a press briefing. She was witnessing a lesson in leadership, in humanity, and in the subtle power of empathy. Trump leaned forward slightly, lowering his voice. "You remind me of someone I used to know," he said. "Persistent, principled, unafraid to ask the hard questions. Even when it's uncomfortable." Maya blinked. It wasn't flattery. It was recognition. She felt seen, understood, and respected in a way that few had ever acknowledged. "Every decision carries a ripple," he continued. "And every person you talk to, every story you write can be part of that ripple. You can choose to lift people or divide them. It's always your choice. The lesson hit her profoundly. Journalism, like leadership, wasn't just about chasing headlines. It was about responsibility, about impact, about choosing empathy over sensation. My eyes moistened slightly. Here was a man she had expected to defend himself or deflect criticism. Yet he spoke. With sincerity and reflection, the room's tension shifted. It was no longer about confrontation. It was about understanding. For the first time in her career, she felt her work mattered on a level deeper than by lines or ratings. She was part of something bigger, a dialogue that could change minds, hearts, and even lives. Maya took a deep breath and asked the question she had been wrestling with. Mr. President, how do you handle people who misunderstand or misrepresent your intentions? Trump paused, looking out at the room, Asif measuring every word. It's difficult, he admitted, and it's painful when you feel misjudged. But you can't control perception. You can only control your actions, your honesty, and your integrity. The lesson resonated deeply with Maya. How often had she been frustrated by misunderstanding both in her career and personal life? How often had she judged others without knowing their full story? I try to do what I believe is right even if others disagree, he continued. And sometimes you have to accept that the world won't see it the way you do. Maya nodded. It wasn't easy, but she understood. True courage wasn't about approval. It was about staying true to one's principles, no matter the external noise. Trump leaned closer. Here's a piece of advice you might not expect from me, he said, a wry smile on his face. Never underestimate the power of listening, of humility, and of compassion. Those are really traits that endure long after the headlines fade. Maya's eyes widened. In her years as a journalist, she had chased scoops, exposes, and breaking news. But this was a reminder that the most powerful work often came from understanding, connection, and empathy. She realized that tonight's briefing wasn't just about asking questions. It was about learning, growing, and carrying forward lessons into the world. For the first time, Maya felt a surge of clarity. She could walk out and claim victory in defiance. But staying, listening, and asking the tough questions was the real courage. Trump noticed her thoughtful expression. Courage isn't always loud, he said. Sometimes it's quiet. Sometimes it's just standing your ground when no one is watching. Her hands unclenched. She understood now. Courage wasn't performance. It was intention. Trump's expression softened further. Even those in power have fears, regrets, and doubts, he admitted. Acknowledging them doesn't weaken you. It strengthens your humanity. Maya felt a lump in her throat. For years, she had seen leaders as distant figures, immune to fear or regret. This moment shattered that illusion. It reminded her that everyone, no matter their position, was human, and empathy was the bridge connecting all of us. Maya lowered her pen. Thank you for being honest, she said quietly. It's rare to hear this level of reflection in this environment, Trump nodded. Honesty is always rare. Courage is rarer, but both are essential if you want to leave a positive impact unfueled. The press room seemed to fade around them. For Maya, it wasn't about politics anymore. It was about humanity. Trump continued, your questions, your integrity, your persistence, they matter. Don't ever doubt the impact you can have. Even a single question can change the way people think and sometimes even their lives. Maya felt a warmth she hadn't anticipated. Her work was more than a career. It was a responsibility, a tool to shape understanding, compassion, and truth. The room's tension eased, replaced by a shared understanding. Trump looked at Maya and said, sometimes the most important stories aren't the ones written on paper. They're the ones written in hearts. Maya's eyes welled up. This encounter had transformed her perspective, not just as a journalist, but as a human being. As the briefing ended, reporters began filing out. Maya hesitated, savoring the moment. Trump extended his hand, not as a political gesture, but as a human one. Remember, Maya, he said softly, it's not about making headlines. It's about making a difference. She shook his hand, overwhelmed by the sincerity she hadn't expected. Later that night, Maya sat in her apartment, notebook open, reflecting. She realized she had nearly walked away from a moment that would change her life. A single decision to stay, to listen, to ask meaningful questions had made all the difference. Her article would be more than a story, it would be a reflection of courage, humanity, and empathy. Maya's story went viral not because it was scandalous, but because it was human. Readers were inspired by her courage and then expected vulnerability of a man. Often misunderstood, she realized the true impact came not from conflict or confrontation, but from dialogue, empathy, and integrity. Thellison stayed with her. Sometimes Michael back isn't a rebuke. It's an invitation to grow. And in that moment, she knew the courage to stay, to ask, and to listen could change not just stories, but lives.